she took her dying granddaughter to a charity clinic. The doctor said her only hope was the clinic's secret founder, her billionaire CEO ex-husband. The words came out before I could stop them, sharp and unforgiving as the March wind cutting through the cemetery. "You're a coward, Richard." My ex-husband's face went pale, kneeling there in the grass before our daughter's grave. Nearly 8 years of careful distance between us, and this was how we ended up. Him begging for a second chance. Me holding all the power for once in our marriage. "But Margaret," he said, his voice breaking in a way I'd never heard during our 31 years together. "She's my granddaughter. Doesn't she deserve to know her grandfather?" I stepped closer to Rachel's headstone, running my fingers over the carved letters of my daughter's name. "Lily deserves consistency," I said, each word measured and deliberate. "Stability. People who won't abandon her when being present gets difficult. Can you guarantee you'll be that person? That 10 years from now, when she needs you for something that conflicts with a business meeting, you'll choose her?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Richard Sullivan, billionaire CEO, master of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, couldn't promise to show up for a 7-year-old girl. Even after his money had saved her life. Even after funding the clinic that pulled my granddaughter back from death's door. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. And I was about to teach him that gratitude doesn't mean forgiveness, that saving someone's life doesn't entitle you to be part of it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this impossible choice began. Before we begin, I wrote a short guide for mothers called Before It's Too Late, Mom. How to reconnect with adult children, repair broken relationships, and rebuild family bonds. If you've ever wished your relationship with your child was closer, scan this code to get a copy. To the moment I learned that the only thing standing between my granddaughter and death was the man who'd already destroyed my daughter. The hospital corridor smelled like antiseptic and fear. I'd worked as a nurse for 38 years before retirement, and I knew that smell intimately. Industrial cleaner trying to mask desperation. Disinfectant covering the metallic scent of blood and tears. But standing outside the observation window of St. Catherine's Children's Hospital at 2:47 on a February morning in 2024, watching my 7-year-old granddaughter sleep fitfully behind the glass, I discovered a new layer beneath all those familiar smells. Time running out. That's what I smelled. The sharp, cold scent of minutes and hours slipping away like water through my fingers. Lily's small chest rose and fell with a rhythm that seemed too fragile to sustain life. Monitors beeped softly, tracking heartbeats and oxygen levels and all the tiny measurements that separated living from dying. Her auburn hair, so much like her mother's had been, spread across the pillow in tangles. And 4 lines snaked from her thin arm to a bag of fluids hanging beside the bed. She looked impossibly small in that adult-sized hospital bed, like a doll someone had forgotten. "Mrs. Sullivan?" I turned from the window, my spine automatically straightening despite the exhaustion that had settled into my bones like winter frost. Dr. Patricia Chen stood in the hallway, her white coat crisp even at this ungodly hour. Her face carried that particular expression I recognized immediately. The gentle look that preceded devastating news. In my 38 years as a registered nurse, I'd worn that exact expression myself. I knew what was coming. Dr. Chen gestured toward a small consultation room across the hall. The kind with a box of tissues on the table and chairs that were supposed to be comforting but just made your back hurt. I followed her inside, my sensible shoes squeaking slightly on the linoleum floor. "The latest labs confirm what we suspected," Dr. Chen said, settling into her chair with the clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. "Lily's condition is progressing faster than we anticipated." "How much faster?" She hesitated, and I watched her choose her words carefully. "Without intervention, we're looking at weeks. Maybe a month." The room didn't spin. I didn't gasp or cry out or do any of the dramatic things people do in movies when they receive death sentences. I'd spent the last 11 months preparing for this moment. Reading every medical journal I could access through my old hospital credentials. Consulting every specialist my modest savings could afford. Exhausting every option, every possibility, every last avenue of hope. I'd known this was coming. Knowing didn't make it hurt less. And with intervention? I asked, though I already knew this answer too. We'd had this conversation in variations for 6 months now. Dr. Chen set down her clipboard and leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. There's a specialist. Dr. James Whitmore at the Bennett Clinic downtown. He's pioneered a treatment protocol for cases like Lily's. Experimental, but he's had remarkable success with pediatric autoimmune disorders that don't respond to conventional therapy. I've called the Bennett Clinic 4 times, I said, my voice steady despite the fist tightening around my heart. They have a 2-year waiting list and don't take Medicaid. The intake coordinator quoted me $40,000 just for the initial consultation and diagnostic series. That doesn't include the actual treatment. I didn't mention that my entire savings account held $18,000. Money I'd scraped together from selling my daughter Rachel's house after the accident. From my pension. From taking on extra work as a grief counselor for other families navigating loss. Money that had already been depleted paying for the treatments Medicaid wouldn't cover, the specialists who didn't accept state insurance, the medications that required prior authorizations we never got. Lily technically had Medicaid. But Medicaid didn't cover experimental treatments. Didn't pay for out-of-network specialists. Didn't bridge the gap between dying and the kind of cutting-edge care that might actually save her life. $40,000 might as well have been $4 million. Dr. Chen glanced toward the door, then back at me with an expression that looked almost conspiratorial. There's something else. The Bennett Clinic runs a separate program out of a facility in Queens. The Hope Harbor Clinic. Same specialists, same protocols, completely free for patients who qualify. They're very selective, very private about it, but Lily's case might meet their criteria. Hope was a dangerous thing. I'd learned to live without it over the past 11 months. To focus instead on what I could control. Lily's comfort. My own composure. The practical details of loving someone you knew you'd lose. But hearing there was a chance, even a slim one, made something crack in my carefully constructed defenses. How do I apply? I'll make a call, Dr. Chen said, already reaching for her phone. Get dressed and be ready to leave within the hour. They've agreed to see Lily this morning. She paused, her professional mask slipping just enough for me to see genuine concern underneath. Margaret, the clinic is funded by a private benefactor. Very wealthy, very particular about privacy. If they accept Lily's case, there will be conditions. Possibly including non-disclosure agreements. Are you comfortable with that? I looked back toward the observation window where Lily slept, her small chest rising and falling with the fragile rhythm of borrowed time. For this child, the last piece of my daughter I had left, I would sign anything. Agree to anything. Prostrate myself before anyone. I'll do whatever it takes. The Hope Harbor Clinic occupied a renovated brownstone in a quiet Queens neighborhood where tree-lined streets suggested community rather than wealth. Early morning light filtered through the leaves of old oak trees, dappling the sidewalk with shifting patterns of shadow and gold. Nothing about the exterior suggested it was connected to cutting-edge medical care. It looked like a large, welcoming home. Which I supposed was exactly the point. I carried Lily up the front steps, her weight alarmingly slight in my arms. At 7 years old, she should have been too big to carry comfortably. Should have been squirming and insisting she could walk by herself. But the disease had stolen her muscle mass, her energy, her childish plumpness. She felt like a bundle of bird bones wrapped in pale skin. "Grandma," Lily murmured against my shoulder, her breath warm on my neck. "I don't want more needles." My throat closed around the lie I wanted to tell. The reassurance that would ease this child's fear. But I'd made a vow when Lily came to live with me 3.5 years ago, after her father David's death in 2020. No more lies, even kind ones. Lily deserved truth. I know, sweetheart. But these are the good doctors Dr. Chen told us about. They're going to help you feel better. Promise? I paused at the clinic's front door, looking down at her face. Those green eyes so much like Rachel's, watching me with the particular wisdom that sick children develop too young. The understanding that adults can't fix everything, no matter how much they want to. I promise these doctors are the best chance we have, I said carefully. And I promise I'll be with you the whole time. Okay, Grandma. The clinic's interior matched its exterior warmth. Soft lighting that didn't have the harsh fluorescent quality of hospitals. Comfortable furniture that looked like it belonged in someone's living room rather than a medical facility. Walls painted in soothing blues and greens. A reception area where several families sat quietly, their hushed conversations and children's muffled coughs creating an atmosphere of shared struggle and tentative hope. A woman in her 40s approached us, wearing scrubs but carrying herself with the authority of someone who ran things. Margaret Sullivan? Yes. I'm Karen Reeves, the clinic coordinator. Dr. Whitmore is ready to see Lily now. She led us down a hallway lined with children's artwork. Crayon drawings of families and houses and dogs. Watercolor paintings of flowers and sunshine. Each one labeled with a first name and age. Emma, age 6. Marcus, age 9. Sophia, age 5. Children who'd passed through these halls seeking the same desperate hope that brought us here. The examination room was designed for children. Cheerful murals of animals and rainbows covered the walls. Toys sat in colorful bins in the corners. But it was also equipped with state-of-the-art medical technology. Monitoring equipment. Examination table with pediatric adjustments. Locked cabinets that I knew held medications and supplies. Dr. Whitmore was younger than I expected. Maybe 50, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and steady hands that moved with practiced gentleness as he helped Lily onto the examination table. He had the kind of face that immediately put children at ease. The warm smile of someone who'd chosen pediatrics because he genuinely liked kids. "Hello, Lily," he said, settling onto a rolling stool at her eye level. "I'm Dr. Whitmore. I hear you've been feeling pretty tired lately." Lily nodded, her small hands gripping the edge of the examination table. "I get tired a lot. And my bones hurt sometimes. That must be really hard. You're very brave to come see me today." The examination lasted 40 minutes. Dr. Whitmore was thorough but gentle, explaining each step to Lily in language she could understand. He asked her questions about what foods she liked, what her favorite color was, whether she had any pets. Making her comfortable while his trained hands palpated her lymph nodes, checked her reflexes, listened to her heart and lungs. Meanwhile, he asked me detailed questions about Lily's medical history. I told him everything. About Rachel's death in the car accident in January 2023. About Lily's father David, who'd died from a sudden heart attack in 2020 when Lily was only 3 years old. How I'd been helping Rachel raise Lily even before David died, and had taken full custody after Rachel's accident. I was honest about our financial situation. My limited income from my pension and my still growing grief counseling practice. The fact that I was raising Lily alone with no other family support. That Medicaid covered basic care but not the experimental treatments she needed. I explained that Rachel had been estranged from her father since our divorce in 2016. That Richard didn't even know Lily existed. After David's death and Rachel's struggles as a single mother, my daughter had wanted nothing to do with the man who'd failed her throughout her life. When Rachel died, I'd seen no reason to inform Richard he had a granddaughter. He'd lost the right to know about our family. When Dr. Whitmore finally sat back, his expression was serious but not hopeless. Lily's case is severe, but it's exactly the kind of challenge this clinic was created to address. I believe we can help her. I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time since entering the building. What does the treatment involve? Aggressive immunotherapy combined with specialized medication protocols. She'd need to come here 3 times a week for the first 3 months, then twice weekly for another 4 months, then weekly for several months after that. It's demanding, and the timeline is longer than standard treatments, but based on similar cases, I'm cautiously optimistic we can achieve full remission within 10 to 12 months. Full remission. The words I'd been afraid to hope for. The possibility that Lily might actually survive this. Might grow up. Might have a life. And the cost? The Hope Harbor Clinic provides all services free of charge to accepted patients, Dr. Whitmore said. Our benefactor believes every child deserves access to cutting-edge care regardless of their family's financial situation. It was too good. I'd learned through hard experience that when something seemed too good to be true, there was always a catch. Always a price hidden in the fine print. Always something you'd have to give up that you didn't know you were trading away. What's the catch? I asked directly. Dr. Whitmore smiled slightly, appreciating my bluntness. The catch is that our benefactor values privacy. Families we help are asked to sign agreements protecting his identity and the clinic's operations. We also ask that you not publicize your treatment here or discuss our protocols with other medical facilities. The research we're doing is proprietary. I don't care about publicity, I said. I care about my granddaughter. Then we have an understanding. Dr. Whitmore pulled out a tablet from a drawer in the examination counter. I'll need you to review and sign the intake paperwork, including the confidentiality agreement. Once that's complete, we can start Lily's treatment as early as tomorrow. He handed me the tablet, and I began reading through the documents carefully. My nursing background had taught me to pay attention to details others might miss. The medical consent forms were standard. Patient privacy acknowledgments. Intellectual property protection clauses. Agreement not to sue for complications arising from experimental treatment, which was reasonable given the circumstances. I was 3 pages into the documents when I reached the benefactor disclosure section. My hands stopped moving. There, in stark black text against the white screen, was a name I hadn't spoken aloud in nearly 8 years. A name that still had the power to stop my breath and restart my heart in an irregular, painful rhythm. Richard Sullivan, CEO of Sullivan Global Industries, founder and primary benefactor of Hope Harbor Clinic. The tablet slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. Dr. Whitmore caught it smoothly, his expression shifting from professional to concerned. Mrs. Sullivan? Are you all right? I couldn't breathe. The careful composure I'd maintained through 11 months of watching Lily decline, through the funeral of my only child, through the divorce that had shattered my life nearly 8 years ago, all of it cracked like ice over a frozen river. Fracture lines spreading in every direction until I thought I might split completely apart. Richard. My ex-husband. The man who'd chosen board meetings over our daughter's college graduation. Who'd missed Rachel's wedding to David because of a merger in Singapore. Who'd finally walked away from our marriage when I'd begged him to slow down, to be present, to choose our struggling family over his expanding empire. Our daughter, his daughter, had died alone in a car accident a year ago. And Richard hadn't even attended the funeral. He'd sent flowers with a card signed by his assistant, and a check for $50,000. Which I'd torn into pieces and scattered over Rachel's grave like the worthless paper it was. I'd made sure Richard didn't know about Lily. Rachel had cut him off completely after our divorce, and I'd honored that choice. When Rachel died, I deliberately kept Lily's existence from him. Changed our address. Used my maiden name for Lily's school records. Made sure there was no trail that would lead back to Richard Sullivan. And now this clinic, this lifeline for Lily, belonged to him. I need a minute, I managed, standing so abruptly that my chair scraped against the floor. Lily, sweetheart, stay here with Dr. Whitmore. Grandma needs some air. Lily's worried face was the last thing I saw before I pushed through the door and down the hallway. Past Karen Reeves at the reception desk. Past the families waiting quietly in chairs. Past the children's artwork proclaiming hope and healing. I made it outside before the rage hit. White hot and purifying, it flooded through me like lava. Nearly 8 years. For nearly 8 years, I'd rebuilt myself from the ruins of our marriage. Gone back to school at 60 for my grief counseling degree. Created a life that mattered, helping other families navigate loss and trauma. Raised my standards, my expectations, my sense of self-worth to a place where I'd never again accept scraps of attention from someone who should have given me everything. And now Richard was forcing his way back into my life. Not through apology or reconciliation. Not by earning his way back. But through the one thing that could bring me to my knees. Lily's survival. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to call him. My fingers remembered the number I'd kept for emergencies I'd hoped would never come. For legal issues or financial questions about the divorce settlement. For the kinds of practical necessities that required contact but not connection. He answered on the second ring. "Margaret?" Richard's voice was older than I remembered. Rougher, like he'd spent years shouting or maybe years staying silent when he should have spoken. But unmistakable. I would have known that voice in a crowd of thousands. "Dr. Whitmore said you might call." "You knew." "It wasn't a question. You knew Lily was coming to your clinic." "I was notified this morning when her case was flagged for review." "Margaret, I didn't know Rachel had a child. I didn't know I had a granddaughter until today." The pain in his voice sounded genuine, but I'd learned not to trust Richard's emotions. He'd been genuinely sorry before. Sorry for missing birthdays and graduations and the thousand small moments that built a childhood. Sorry had never changed anything. "And whose fault is that?" I said coldly. "You sent flowers to Rachel's funeral. Roses, which she was allergic to, with a card that said with deepest sympathy, Richard Sullivan, like she was a business associate who'd died. You couldn't even sign it yourself. Your assistant's handwriting was on that card." "I know." His voice was quiet. "I was a coward. I couldn't face what I'd done to her. So you sent money instead. $50,000. Like that would somehow make up for being an absent father for 35 years. There was a long silence. In the background, I could hear the distant sounds of an office. Phones ringing. The muted voices of assistants and executives. The machinery of Richard's empire grinding away while we navigated this impossible conversation. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weariness I didn't remember from our marriage. "I know money doesn't fix anything. But the clinic does help children. Real children who need care. Whatever you think of me, the work here is genuine. Don't pretend you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart," I said. "You want something. You always want something." "I want to help my granddaughter," he said simply. "That's all." "Your granddaughter," I repeated, and the bitterness in my voice surprised even me. "The child you've never met. The daughter of the woman you ignored until she died. Tell me, Richard, did the guilt finally get to you? Is that why you're playing savior?" "I'm not playing anything." Now his voice hardened with the authority I remembered all too well. The CEO tone that had commandeered boardrooms and dominated our marriage. "The clinic is real. The treatment is real. Dr. Whitmore is the best in his field, and he believes he can save Lily's life. Whatever you think of me, don't let it stop you from accepting help she needs." And there it was. The trap. He knew I couldn't refuse. Knew that my hatred of him meant nothing measured against Lily's life. He'd found the one way to force himself back into my existence, and we both knew I had no choice but to accept. "I'll sign your papers," I said, my voice cold and clear. "Lily will receive treatment. But let me be absolutely clear about something, Richard. This doesn't make you her grandfather. It doesn't make you part of our family. It doesn't earn you redemption for missing Rachel's entire life. You're a donor, nothing more. A checkbook that happens to fund the clinic we need. Margaret." I'm not finished. Steel threaded through every word now. "You will not visit the clinic while we're there. You will not send gifts or letters or try to establish any relationship with Lily. You'll do what you do best. Stay away and let your money speak for you. Those are my terms. If you can't accept them, I'll find another way to save her." It was a bluff. We both knew there was no other way. Dr. Chen had been clear. Dr. Whitmore was one of maybe 3 specialists in the country who could help Lily with her specific condition. The other two had waiting lists measured in years, not weeks. Years we didn't have. But Richard needed to understand that accepting his help didn't mean accepting him. That gratitude and forgiveness were two entirely different things. That saving Lily's life didn't entitle him to be part of it. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Then, quietly, almost too quietly to hear over the morning traffic passing by the clinic, he said the words I needed to hear. Agreed. I'll stay away. The victory felt hollow. But it was all I had. Good, I said. We'll start treatment tomorrow. I ended the call before he could say anything else. Before the treacherous part of my heart that remembered loving him, that remembered the man he'd been before ambition consumed him, could mistake his concern for something it wasn't. Dr. Whitmore was waiting when I returned to the examination room. Lily was drawing on a piece of paper Karen Reeves had given her, her small tongue poking out in concentration as she colored what looked like a butterfly. Everything all right, Mrs. Sullivan? Dr. Whitmore asked quietly. I sat down and held out my hand for the tablet. Everything's fine. Where do I sign? If he noticed that my hand was shaking, he was kind enough not to mention it. 10 weeks later, the world looked different. Not dramatically, not like the sudden miracle recoveries you see in movies. But different in small, precious ways that added up to hope. Lily had color in her cheeks. Real color, not the feverish flush that came with her bad days, but the healthy pink of a child who was winning her battle instead of losing it. She'd gained 4 pounds, which Dr. Whitmore celebrated like a major victory. Because it was. Every ounce meant her body was building instead of breaking down. Most importantly, the blood work showed her immune markers beginning to stabilize. Her body was learning to stop attacking itself. Learning to fight the disease instead of fighting her. It was early progress, and Dr. Whitmore reminded me regularly that we had at least 8 more months of treatment ahead, but it was progress. We'd fallen into a rhythm over those 10 weeks. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings at the clinic. Lily was brave about the treatments, though I could see the fear in her eyes when the needles came out. She'd squeeze my hand so hard it left marks, but she never cried. Never complained. She was tougher than any 7-year-old should have to be. Afternoons I spent on my grief counseling practice. Working from home, conducting sessions via video call with clients who were navigating their own losses. Helping them find meaning in the wreckage of their lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, counseling others through grief while carrying my daughter's death like a stone in my chest. But the work mattered. It grounded me. Reminded me that I was more than Lily's guardian, more than Richard's ex-wife accepting his charity. I was Dr. Margaret Sullivan, licensed therapist, helping people survive the unsurvivable. Evenings belonged to Lily. Homework at the kitchen table, though she'd missed so much school that we were mostly focused on keeping her reading skills sharp. Breathing exercises Dr. Whitmore had taught us. Stories before bed. The normal, precious routines of raising a child. It was exhausting. Demanding. It filled every hour of my day with purpose and left me falling into bed each night too tired to think. Which was exactly what I needed. Because busy meant no time to think about Richard. About the strange gift of his absence. About the complicated knot of gratitude and resentment that tightened in my chest every time we walked through the clinic doors. True to his word, Richard had stayed away. The clinic staff never mentioned him except in the most professional terms. The benefactor has approved additional funding for your treatment plan. The founder's grant covers this new medication. He was a ghost. A name on paperwork. Exactly what I demanded. Which is why, when I walked into the clinic on a Wednesday morning in late April and found Richard sitting in Dr. Whitmore's private office, my first reaction was betrayal so sharp it stole my breath. What is he doing here? I demanded, my voice cutting through whatever conversation they'd been having. Dr. Whitmore stood immediately, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Margaret, please. There's been a complication. A complication that requires breaking our agreement. Richard rose from his chair, and I felt the familiar shock of seeing him in person. Nearly 8 years had weathered him in ways I hadn't expected. More gray in his dark hair, now silver at the temples. Deeper lines around his eyes, carved by stress or regret or maybe just time. A heaviness to his shoulders that success shouldn't have brought. But his blue eyes were the same. Sharp and assessing, taking in my defensive posture with something that looked like regret. Or maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see. The FDA is reviewing Dr. Whitmore's research protocols, Richard said, his voice carefully neutral. One of our patients, not Lily, had a severe adverse reaction last week. They're threatening to shut down the entire program pending investigation. My nursing background kicked in automatically, my mind racing through the implications. FDA investigations of clinical trials could take a year, sometimes longer. Clinical trials got suspended. Experimental treatments stopped completely until review boards cleared them. How long? I asked, though I already knew the answer would be devastating. The investigation could take 12 to 18 months, Dr. Whitmore said quietly. Lily's treatment would have to stop immediately. All clinical trials, all experimental protocols, everything gets suspended. She'll relapse. I wasn't asking. I was stating medical fact. If Lily's treatment stopped now, before we'd achieved full remission, the disease would come roaring back with a vengeance. The 10 weeks of progress would be lost. Probably in a matter of days. Most likely, yes, Dr. Whitmore admitted, and I could see the genuine pain in his eyes. He'd grown attached to Lily over the past 10 weeks. She had that effect on people. However, Richard interjected, there's another option. I turned to look at him, and he must have seen the suspicion on my face. Must have known that every instinct I had was screaming that this was a trap. Another way for him to insert himself into our lives. I have connections at Massachusetts General Hospital, he continued. They're not running clinical trials, so they're not affected by the FDA investigation. I can get Lily into their pediatric immunology program under Dr. Sarah Chen. She trained Dr. Whitmore, actually. Best in the country for cases like Lily's. In Boston, I said flatly. 300 miles away. I've arranged for the Sullivan Foundation to cover temporary housing through a partnership with the hospital's family residence program. It's a building where out-of-town patient families stay. You and Lily would have a 2-bedroom apartment at no cost. The foundation would also cover all medical expenses not covered by Medicaid. Not your personal apartment, I said, needing clarification. Not something you control. No. It's a hospital program the foundation supports. I'll have no access to the building, no information about which unit you're in. It's completely separate from me. A golden cage, but at least one with some boundaries. Accept his help. Uproot my entire life. Move to a city where I had no support system, no work connections, no independence. Place myself and Lily under his patronage, even if indirectly. No. Both men stared at me like I'd said something incomprehensible. Margaret, Dr. Whitmore started gently, Lily needs continuous care. If the FDA shuts us down, then I'll find another clinic. Another doctor. There are other options. Not like this, Richard said, and I heard the edge creeping into his voice now. Frustration breaking through his careful control. Not with her specific condition. Dr. Chen is one of maybe 3 specialists in the country who could help her, and the other 2 have 18-month waiting lists. This is the best option. The best option for whom? I challenged, taking a step toward him. For Lily? Or for you, trying to buy your way back into a family you abandoned? The words hit their mark. Richard flinched like I'd slapped him, his composed facade cracking just enough for me to see the guilt underneath. Good. I wanted him to feel it. Wanted him to understand that his money didn't erase his failures. Didn't make up for the years of neglect that had killed our daughter's spirit long before that car accident killed her body. This isn't about me, Richard said quietly. This is about a 7-year-old girl who needs medical care. Whatever you think of me, whatever I've done wrong, and I know the list is long, don't let it cost Lily her life. Don't you dare. My voice shook with fury I'd been holding back for nearly 8 years. Don't you dare make this about my pride or my anger. You lost the right to have opinions about my choices when you chose your company over our daughter 20 times in a row. I was advancing on him now, years of suppressed rage pouring out in a torrent I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. When you missed her high school graduation for a conference in Dubai. When you forgot her birthday 3 years running. When she was struggling with depression in college and called you 17 times, and you answered 3 of those calls. 3, Richard. And when you did answer, you told her to toughen up and focus because you were too busy to actually be her father. Richard's face had gone pale, but he didn't back away. Didn't defend himself. Just stood there taking the hits like he knew he deserved every one. Rachel died believing her father didn't love her, I said, and my voice broke on our daughter's name. Do you understand that? Your daughter, our daughter, went into the ground thinking she wasn't worth your time. And now you want to swoop in and save her child, like that somehow makes up for failing to save her? His face twisted with pain, and for a moment I thought he might actually cry. Richard Sullivan, who I'd never seen shed a tear in 31 years of marriage, looked like he might break down right there in Dr. Whitmore's office. You're right, he said simply. Everything you're saying is right. I failed Rachel. I failed you. I failed as a husband and a father in every way that mattered. The admission should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like ash. Too late. Too inadequate. Too little to fill the void his absence had created. I can't fix the past, Richard continued, his voice rough. I can't bring Rachel back or undo the damage I did. But I can help Lily. And I'm asking you to let me, not because it redeems me, it doesn't, but because she deserves every chance at life. On your terms, I said bitterly. In housing you provide, in your debt, under your control. No. Richard shook his head firmly. On your terms. You set the boundaries. You decide how much or how little I'm involved. I'm offering resources, Margaret, not reconciliation. I'm not asking to be part of your life. I'm asking to keep my granddaughter alive. Dr. Whitmore had been watching this exchange in silence, but now he spoke gently. Margaret, I know this is complicated. But from a purely medical standpoint, Richard is right. Dr. Chen is Lily's best chance. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of impossible choices pressing down on my shoulders. I'd rebuilt my entire life on the principle that I would never again compromise myself for someone else's convenience. Never again accept less than I deserved. Never again let Richard Sullivan dictate the terms of my existence. But Lily's life wasn't about my principles. Wasn't about my anger or my justified resentment or my hard-won independence. It was about a 7-year-old girl who deserved to grow up. Who deserved to climb trees and learn to read chapter books and maybe someday have children of her own. I need to think about it, I said finally. The FDA review starts Monday, Richard said. We need to move quickly if we're going to get Lily into the program at Mass General. Then I'll give you my answer by Friday. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. And Richard? If I agree to this, if I accept your help again, understand that it changes nothing between us. You're not her grandfather. You're not my ex-husband trying to make amends. You're a wealthy man with resources who happens to share DNA with a dying child. That's the beginning and end of our relationship. I didn't wait for his response. Some truths didn't require acknowledgement. 3 days later, I sat in the small community garden behind my apartment building. Late April sunshine filtered through budding tree branches, promising spring warmth even though the air still held winter's chill. Lily was chasing a butterfly across the grass, moving with an energy I hadn't seen in months. The treatment was working. My granddaughter was coming back to life. And I was about to make a choice that might save her while costing me everything I'd fought to become. My phone rang exactly when I expected it to. Richard, punctual as always. Some things never changed. I answered without preamble. I've made my decision. We'll go to Boston. We'll accept Dr. Chen's treatment and use the foundation housing. Thank you. The relief in his voice was palpable. Margaret, I'll have a foundation administrator contact you with all the arrangements. I'm not finished. Here are my conditions, and they're non-negotiable. I heard him go quiet. Waiting. Learning, maybe, that this wasn't the woman he'd been married to. That woman had begged for his attention, pleaded for his time, accepted whatever scraps of himself he'd been willing to offer. This woman had terms. First, I said, you will have no direct contact with Lily without my explicit permission, given in advance and in writing. Second, all financial arrangements go through the foundation's administrators, not you personally. I won't take money from your hand. Third, you will not visit Boston while we're there without my approval. Fourth, you will not attempt to contact me except through the foundation administrator for necessary logistical matters. I paused, making absolutely certain he heard every word clearly. And fifth, when this is over, when Lily is healthy, you will disappear from our lives again. No birthday cards, no Christmas presents, no attempts to build a relationship you never earned. You funded her treatment. That's your contribution. The rest of her life belongs to me. Margaret. Those are my terms, I interrupted. Accept them or we find another way. The silence stretched long enough that I thought I might have pushed too far. That maybe Richard's guilt only extended so far, and I'd finally hit the limit of what his conscience would tolerate. Then, quietly, he spoke. I accept. But I have one condition of my own. My jaw tightened. What? When Lily is better, when she's healthy and safe, you let me apologize. Not to you. I know you don't want that and I don't deserve it. But to Rachel's memory. Let me visit her grave and say the things I should have said when she was alive. 1 hour. You can be there or not, your choice. But let me say goodbye to my daughter. The request caught me completely off guard. Punched through my anger to hit something softer underneath. Something I thought Richard had destroyed years ago. In nearly 8 years, through all the lawyers and paperwork and division of our shared life, Richard had never asked for anything personal. He'd given me the house without argument. Offered generous alimony that I'd refused after the first year because I didn't want to owe him anything. Signed the divorce papers without contest. But he'd never asked to mourn our daughter. One visit, I said finally. When Lily is in remission. 1 hour at Rachel's grave. I'll be there. You can say whatever you need to say, and then you leave. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep your end of the bargain. I will. And Margaret? I'm alone. No wife, no other children, no family. I know you might have wondered. I just wanted you to know. Everything I have is going into the clinic. It's the only good thing I've ever built. The admission hung in the air between us. I didn't know what to do with it. Didn't want to care that Richard was lonely. That his success had left him isolated. That wasn't my problem anymore. Goodbye, Richard. I ended the call and sat in the spring sunshine, watching Lily laugh as the butterfly eluded her grasp. In about 8 months, if everything went according to plan, we'd be back in New York. Lily would be in remission. And I'd have to keep my promise to let Richard say goodbye to the daughter he'd failed. But that was a problem for future Margaret. Present Margaret had packing to do. 8 months in Boston changed everything and nothing. The family residence building where the Sullivan Foundation had arranged our housing was exactly what Richard had described. A 7-story building 2 blocks from Massachusetts General Hospital, filled with families from across the country seeking specialized medical care. Our 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor was clean and functional, with large windows that let in morning light and a small kitchen that was adequate for our needs. It wasn't Richard's personal property. It wasn't decorated with his taste or controlled by his staff. It was institutional housing managed by the hospital's social services department, and that made it bearable. I could accept this help because it came through proper channels, through systems designed to help families like ours, not through Richard's personal intervention. But knowing he'd made the phone call that secured our spot, that his foundation's donation funded half the building's operating costs, still left a bitter taste in my mouth every time I walked through the lobby. The other families helped. Single mothers whose children were fighting cancer. Grandparents like me raising grandchildren through medical crises. Fathers who'd taken leave from work to be present for their kids' treatment. We formed a small community bound by shared exhaustion and tentative hope. We traded babysitting duties and meal preparation. Shared resources and information about local support services. Mrs. Patterson, a 72-year-old grandmother raising her 8-year-old grandson through leukemia treatment, became a particular friend. She'd watch Lily on the rare occasions I needed to run errands alone, and I'd return the favor with her grandson James. We never talked about how we'd ended up here. The losses that had led to grandmothers raising grandchildren. The failures of parents who should have been present. Those stories were too painful to share, so we focused instead on the practical details of survival. Which pharmacy had the best prices? Which food pantry didn't ask too many questions? How to stretch a fixed income across 2 cities. But Lily was improving. Slowly, incrementally, with setbacks that terrified me and progress that made me weep with relief. Dr. Sarachan was everything Dr. Whitmore had promised. In her early 60s, with silver-streaked black hair and the kind of quiet competence that inspired immediate confidence. She'd reviewed Lily's case files and immediately adjusted the treatment protocol, tweaking medication dosages with the precision that came from 40 years of experience. The first month was brutal. Lily's body rebelled against the aggressive treatment. She spent days too nauseated to eat, nights too uncomfortable to sleep. I held her hair back while she vomited. Carried her to the bathroom when she was too weak to walk. Sang her the same lullabies I'd sung to Rachel 35 years ago, my voice cracking on familiar words that brought back memories of a daughter I'd lost. But by the end of the second month, something shifted. The blood work started improving week by week. Lily's energy returned in small increments. She started asking for seconds at dinner. Started wanting to go to the small park near the residence building. Started being a 7-year-old girl again instead of just a patient. I'd maintained my counseling practice remotely, conducting sessions via video call with my New York clients. The work grounded me. Reminded me that I was more than Lily's guardian, more than Richard's ex-wife accepting his charity. I was Dr. Margaret Sullivan, licensed therapist with a growing reputation in grief counseling, helping people navigate their darkest moments. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, counseling others through grief and loss while living in housing indirectly funded by the man who'd caused me both. But I was also building something. 3 of my Boston clients had referred friends. I'd been invited to speak at a local hospice about supporting families through medical crises. My practice was growing beyond New York, becoming something that could sustain me wherever I lived. That independence mattered. It meant I wasn't entirely dependent on Richard's charity. Wasn't entirely trapped by circumstances beyond my control. Through it all, Richard kept his promises. I never saw him. Never heard from him directly. The foundation administrator, a kind woman named Patricia who seemed genuinely committed to helping families, handled all communication. She called monthly to check if we needed anything, but never pushed, never pried into our personal lives. It was exactly the distance I had demanded. And yet, late at night when Lily was asleep and the apartment was quiet, I sometimes found myself thinking about Richard's admission on the phone. I'm alone. No wife, no other children, no family. I didn't want to care. Told myself his loneliness was earned, that isolation was the natural consequence of choosing ambition over love. But some small, traitorous part of me wondered what his life looked like now. Whether he went home to an empty penthouse. Whether he ate dinner alone. Whether he'd finally learned that money couldn't buy back the things that actually mattered. I pushed those thoughts away whenever they surfaced. Richard's emotional state wasn't my concern. I had a granddaughter to save. By the 4th month, Dr. Chen started using the word remission cautiously. Not as a guarantee, but as a possibility we could start hoping for. Lily's immune markers were stabilizing consistently. Her body was learning to function normally again. The disease that had been destroying her was retreating. By the 6th month, Lily had gained 12 pounds and grown an inch. Her hair, which had thinned during the worst of the treatment, was growing back thick and healthy. She'd made friends with James Patterson and 2 other children in the residence building. They'd formed a small pack that ran through the hallways playing elaborate imagination games that drove the adults crazy and filled the building with the sound of children's laughter. It was the most normal I'd seen Lily since before her diagnosis. By the 8th month, just after Christmas 2024, Dr. Chen sat me down in her office with a smile I'd never seen before. "Margaret, I'm officially declaring Lily in full remission." The words didn't register immediately. I'd been preparing for bad news for so long that good news felt foreign, suspect, too fragile to believe. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be in medicine." Dr. Chen pulled up Lily's latest scans on her computer screen. Her immune markers are completely normal. The inflammation is gone. Her body is functioning exactly as it should. She'll need monitoring for the next 2 years, quarterly checkups to make sure it doesn't come back, but Margaret, she beat it. I started crying before I could stop myself. Deep, wrenching sobs that I'd been holding back for nearly 2 years. Since March 2023 when Lily was first diagnosed. Since January 2023 when Rachel died. Maybe since 2020 when David's death had started this chain of losses that seemed like it would never end. Dr. Chen came around her desk and put her hand on my shoulder. "Let it out. You've earned these tears." When I could finally speak, my voice was rough. "When can we go home? Give me 2 weeks to coordinate with her New York pediatrician and set up the monitoring schedule. Then you can go home." Home. Back to Queens. Back to my apartment and my community garden and Mrs. Chen from my building who'd become like a grandmother to Lily even though we'd only known her a few years. Back to the life I'd built on my own terms. That night, I told Lily we'd be going home soon. She was excited but also sad to leave James and her other friends. We made plans for them to write letters to each other. Promised we'd come back to visit, though I wasn't sure if I'd be able to keep that promise. I also did something I'd been avoiding for 8 months. I called the foundation administrator. "Patricia, I need you to relay a message to Richard Sullivan." "Of course, Margaret." "What would you like me to tell him?" "Tell him Lily is in remission. Tell him the treatment was successful. And tell him I'm ready to honor my promise. He can visit Rachel's grave. 1 hour. I'll contact him directly to arrange the details. I'll pass that along." Patricia paused. "Margaret, I don't know your history with Mr. Sullivan, but I've worked for his foundation for 6 years. I've never seen him care about anything the way he cares about that clinic. Whatever happened between you, the work he's doing there is genuine." "I know," I said. "That doesn't change anything else, but I know." 2 weeks later, Lily and I packed our belongings into the same 2 suitcases we'd brought to Boston 8 months earlier. We said goodbye to Mrs. Patterson and James, to the other families who'd become our temporary community. Promised to stay in touch, knowing that most of those promises would fade with distance and time. The ride back to New York felt both endless and too short. Lily chattered the whole way about going back to her school, seeing her friends, sleeping in her own bed. Planning what she'd tell her classmates about her adventure in Boston. I let her talk, grateful for her excitement, for her energy, for the simple fact that she was alive and healthy and planning a future. But in the back of my mind, I was already rehearsing the conversation I'd need to have with Richard. Already preparing for the cemetery visit I'd promised him. We arrived home on a gray January afternoon in 2025. Our apartment smelled stale from months of being closed up, but it was ours. Familiar and small and perfect. I opened windows to air it out while Lily ran from room to room reacquainting herself with her space. Mrs. Chen from downstairs appeared within an hour, carrying a pot of soup and a loaf of bread. "Welcome home," she said, hugging me tight. "I've been praying for you both." "She's in remission," I told her, and saying it out loud to someone who'd been part of our journey made it feel real for the first time. Thank God. Mrs. Chen looked at Lily, who was showing her a drawing she'd made in Boston. That child is a miracle. She is. That evening, after Lily was asleep in her own bed for the first time in 8 months, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I'd avoided for so long. Richard answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting. Margaret? We're back in New York. Lily's in remission. I heard his breath catch. That's wonderful. I can't tell you how relieved I am. You kept your promises, I said, forcing the words out. You stayed away. You gave us space. So I'm keeping mine. You can visit Rachel's grave. Saturday, 2 o'clock. Evergreen Cemetery in Queens. I'll be there. Thank you. His voice was thick with emotion I didn't want to hear. Thank you for honoring your word. 1 hour, Richard. You say what you need to say, and then you leave our lives again. That was the agreement. I understand. I hung up before the conversation could go anywhere else. Saturday arrived cold and clear, one of those January days where the sky was impossibly blue but the air caught like a knife. I dropped Lily at Mrs. Chen's apartment, telling her I had some errands to run. She didn't ask questions, just hugged Lily close and promised they'd bake cookies while I was gone. The drive to Evergreen Cemetery took 30 minutes. I'd been there dozens of times since Rachel's burial 2 years ago, but today felt different. Heavier somehow. Like I was carrying the weight of more than just my own grief. Rachel's grave was in the newer section, under a young oak tree that had grown noticeably in 2 years. Its branches were bare now, skeletal against the winter sky, but I could imagine the shade it would provide in summer. Rachel had loved climbing trees as a child. This had been my gift to the woman she never got to become. The headstone was simple, exactly what she would have wanted. Rachel Marie Sullivan, beloved daughter and mother, 1988 to 2023. Your love lives on in Lily. I'd chosen those words carefully. Wanted Rachel to be remembered not for how she died, but for what she'd created. Lily was her legacy. Her gift to the world. The best part of her that continued breathing and laughing and growing. Richard arrived exactly at 2 o'clock. I watched his black town car pull into the cemetery parking lot, conspicuous among the modest vehicles scattered throughout. He got out slowly, like his joints hurt, and walked toward me with none of the confident stride I remembered from our marriage. Nearly 8 years had weathered him profoundly. He was 66 now, but looked older. The gray in his hair had spread to silver. The lines around his eyes had deepened into crevices. He'd lost weight, his expensive coat hanging slightly loose on his frame. He looked like a man who'd achieved everything and discovered it meant nothing. Margaret, he said quietly as he approached. Richard. We stood several feet apart, an invisible barrier between us built from years of hurt and anger and choices that couldn't be undone. Thank you for coming, he said. I wasn't sure you would. I keep my promises. Unlike some people. The barb hit its mark, but Richard didn't flinch. Just nodded, accepting it as his due. I moved to stand several feet from Rachel's grave, arms crossed over my chest. Creating physical distance. Making clear through body language that I was here as witness, not participant. Richard walked slowly to the headstone. Stood before it for a long moment without speaking. Just looking at our daughter's name carved into marble, his shoulders bent like he was carrying a physical weight. When he finally moved, it was to kneel in the frozen grass. Slowly, carefully, like a much older man. His fingers reached out to trace Rachel's name, following the carved letters with a gentleness I couldn't remember him showing toward our living daughter. I'm sorry, Rachel. His voice was rough with unshed tears. I'm so goddamn sorry. I'd prepared myself to stay detached. To bear witness without engaging. To let him say his piece and then leave, maintaining the emotional distance that had kept me safe for nearly 8 years. But hearing him apologize to our daughter, too late, always too late, cracked something in my carefully maintained composure. I told myself I was working for you, Richard continued, talking to the headstone like it could absolve him. That every late night, every missed recital, every forgotten birthday was building something that would give you opportunities one never had. Opportunities my father never gave me. But that was a lie. I was working for me. For my ego, my ambition, my need to prove I was more than the poor kid from Queens who got lucky with a business degree and a good idea. He rocked back on his heels, his face twisting with pain. And you paid the price for my selfishness. You grew up with a father who was physically present but emotionally absent. Who gave you things instead of time? Who taught you that love was conditional, that you had to earn attention by being successful enough, accomplished enough, perfect enough to deserve my notice? My throat tightened. Those were the exact words Rachel had said in therapy before her wedding to David. Words I'd found in her journals after her death. Dad only loves success. I'm not successful enough to deserve his love. How did Richard know? Had he somehow found her journals? Talked to her therapist? Or had he finally, belatedly, bothered to understand the daughter he'd failed? When you were struggling with depression in college, Richard said, his voice breaking, you called me 17 times. I know because I pulled the phone records after you died. I needed to see the exact number of times I failed you. 17 calls, and I answered 3 of them. 3, Rachel. And of those 3, I was distracted, impatient, too busy to hear that you were drowning. He pressed his palms against the frozen ground, his shoulders shaking. Your mother begged me to pay attention. Told me you were depressed, that you needed professional help, that my absence was destroying you. And I told her she was being dramatic. That you were just going through a phase. That she needed to stop coddling you and let you grow up. I dismissed your pain because acknowledging it would have meant acknowledging my failure. I remembered those fights. Remembered screaming at Richard that our daughter was disappearing inside her depression. That Rachel had stopped eating, stopped going to classes, stopped answering my calls. And Richard had accused me of being overprotective. Of creating problems that didn't exist. Of making Rachel weak by caring too much. He'd refused to even consider that his absence had consequences. That a daughter needed her father to care whether she lived or died. I killed you, Richard said to the grave, and I heard genuine anguish in his voice. Not literally, not directly, but I killed the part of you that believed you were worth loving. I made you think that love had to be earned, that you had to be perfect to deserve attention. And when you couldn't be perfect, when you struggled like every human being struggles, I wasn't there. I was never there. He stopped, his breath coming in ragged gasps like he was running out of air. And when you met David, when you finally found someone who loved you without conditions, I missed your wedding. Your wedding, Rachel. The most important day of your life up to that point, and I was in Singapore closing a merger that I can't even remember now. I can't remember the company name or the terms or why it was so important. But I remember the look on your mother's face when she called to tell me I'd missed it. Like she'd finally given up on me. You sent flowers, I said, my voice cold and sharp, cutting through his confession. Roses. Rachel was allergic to roses. You would have known that if you'd ever paid attention. And the card was signed by your assistant. I recognized Jennifer's handwriting. Richard's head dropped like I'd struck him. I didn't even order them myself. I told Jennifer to handle it. Couldn't be bothered to take 5 minutes to send my own daughter a wedding gift. The admission should have made me angrier. Instead, I just felt tired. Hollowed out by years of carrying rage that changed nothing. Fury that didn't bring Rachel back from the dead or give Lily her mother or turn back time to when Richard had still been capable of change. I've spent the last 2 years trying to understand why you stayed away from her funeral, I said quietly. I told myself you were heartless, that you never loved her, that you were incapable of caring about anyone but yourself. That was easier than accepting the truth. What truth? That you're a coward. The word hung in the air between us, brutal and accurate. Richard flinched like I'd slapped him, but he didn't defend himself. Didn't argue. just knelt there in the frozen grass taking the hit because somewhere deep down, he knew I was right. You loved Rachel, I continued, moving closer to the grave. Standing beside him but not with him. I know you did, in your broken, limited way. But you loved your image of yourself more. You loved being Richard Sullivan, self-made billionaire, more than you loved being Rachel's father. And when faced with evidence that you'd failed at the thing that actually mattered, you ran. Just like you ran from our marriage when I asked you to change. Just like you've run from every difficult emotion in your life by burying yourself in work. Richard didn't defend himself. You're right. I know I'm right. I moved even closer, standing directly over him now. Here's what I wish you understood, Richard. Rachel didn't need you to be perfect. She needed you to try. To show up imperfectly, to admit when you were wrong, to choose her over board meetings and mergers and whatever the hell you thought was more important than your own child. She needed you to be human with her, to be vulnerable, to let her see that you struggled too. But you never did. You were always the untouchable CEO, always too busy, always too important to be her father. I know that now, he said quietly. Now is too late. The words exploded from me with force that startled us both. Suddenly I was shouting, years of suppressed fury pouring out in a torrent I couldn't control even if I wanted to. Now is you kneeling at her grave, crying tears that can't change anything. Now is you funding a clinic to save her daughter because you couldn't save her. Now is you pulling phone records to count your failures after she's already dead. Now is fucking useless, Richard. I was crying now. Angry tears I'd held back for 2 years. For nearly 8 years. For the entire duration of our marriage. Tears for Rachel who died believing she wasn't enough. For Lily who'd almost died because I was too proud to ask for help from the one person who had the resources to save her. For myself, for the woman I'd been who'd wasted 31 years loving a man who didn't know how to love back. You want absolution? I demanded, my voice raw. You want to apologize and feel better about yourself? Well, Rachel isn't here to forgive you. And I won't forgive you on her behalf. Your daughter died believing she wasn't enough for you, and nothing you do now changes that. Not the clinic, not the money, not these pretty words you're saying to a piece of marble. Richard stood slowly, his knees cracking audibly, his face wet with tears he wasn't trying to hide. I've never seen him cry in all our years together, and seeing it now felt like a violation somehow. Like he was finally being human when it was too late for it to matter. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said, his voice steady despite the tears. I'm asking for the chance to do better by Lily. To be the grandfather I failed to be as a father. No. I shook my head firmly, definitively. That single word carrying the weight of every boundary I'd fought to establish, every standard I'd refused to lower, every time I'd chosen self-respect over convenience. That's exactly what you don't get to do. You don't get to use Lily to redeem yourself. She's not your second chance or your do-over or your therapy project. She's a little girl who has a life that doesn't include you, and that's how it's going to stay. She's my granddaughter. Biologically, I interrupted. But family is built through showing up, through being present, through earning trust day after day, year after year. You haven't done that. You wrote checks and made phone calls and stayed carefully distant while I did the actual work of raising her. Of sitting with her through chemotherapy. Of holding her while she cried. Of being there every single day, even when it was hard. I stepped closer to him, my voice dropping to something quieter but no less forceful. Here's what's going to happen. Lily is in remission. We're home in New York. You're going to continue funding the clinic because it's good work and other children need it. The Rachel Sullivan Memorial Program you created is helping real families, and that matters. But you and I? We're done. No dinners to discuss Lily's progress. No birthday visits. No slow rebuilding of trust. You stay the anonymous benefactor, and I continue being her grandmother. That's not fair to Lily, Richard said, and I heard desperation creeping into his voice. Doesn't she deserve to know her grandfather? It was the question I had been expecting. The argument I'd prepared for during the entire 8 months in Boston. And I had my answer ready. Lily deserves consistency and stability and people who won't abandon her when being present gets difficult. Can you guarantee you'll be that person? That 10 years from now, when she needs you for something that conflicts with an important board meeting, you'll choose her? That when being a grandfather stops feeling like redemption and starts feeling like obligation, you'll still show up? The question hung between us like a blade. I watched Richard's face as he processed what I was asking. Watched him try to formulate a promise he couldn't honestly make. Watched him realize that after everything, after the clinic and the treatment and the money, he was still the same man who'd chosen work over his daughter 17 times when she'd needed him most. His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said softly. You're still the same man, Richard. You founded a beautiful clinic and saved my granddaughter's life, and I'm genuinely grateful for that. The work you're doing there matters. It's meaningful and good and probably the best thing you've ever built. But gratitude isn't love. Helping Lily doesn't entitle you to a relationship with her. And saving her life doesn't erase the fact that you couldn't save Rachel. So what do I get? He asked, and there was genuine anguish in his voice. I do everything you ask, I stay away, I fund the treatment, I keep all my promises, and I get nothing? You get the knowledge that you did one thing right, I said. You saved a child's life. Maybe several children's lives through the clinic. That matters, Richard. It's meaningful work. It might even be the legacy you deserve. But it doesn't erase Rachel's empty seat at her college graduation. It doesn't undo the damage you did to our family. It doesn't give you the relationship you never earned. Some mistakes are permanent. I turned back to Rachel's grave, running my fingers over the carved letters of her name one more time. I brought you here because I promised I would. Because Rachel would have wanted me to be fair even when you weren't. You've said what you needed to say. Now I need you to respect my boundaries and leave. Margaret, please. Go, Richard. He stood there for a long moment, and I could feel him struggling with the urge to argue. To negotiate. To use his considerable powers of persuasion to change my mind. The CEO tactics that had built his empire and destroyed our family. But maybe, finally, he'd learned that some things couldn't be bought or bargained for. Before I go, he said quietly, there's something you should know. I've updated my will. When I die, everything goes to the clinic. The Rachel Sullivan Memorial Program. I'm also establishing a trust for Lily's education, managed by independent trustees. She'll have full access when she turns 25. You'll have no control over it and neither will I. It's hers, completely separate from both of us. I don't want your money, Richard. It's not for you. It's for her. So she has choices you didn't have. Choices Rachel didn't have. And the trustees have instructions that I'm never to have contact with her, even through them. This isn't me buying access. This is me making sure she has opportunities, whether I'm alive to see her use them or not. The admission caught me off guard. It was the first thing he'd done that didn't seem designed to benefit him. That acknowledged Lily's future without demanding a role in it. Fine, I said. But she doesn't need to know about it until she's an adult. I'm raising her to understand that security comes from her own strength, not someone else's money. Understood. Richard pulled his coat tighter against the cold. Thank you for letting me do this. For letting me say goodbye to Rachel. For keeping your word even when I know how much you hate me. I don't hate you, I said, and realized it was true. I pity you. You built an empire and lost everything that mattered. You're alone because you chose to be alone. And now that you finally understand what you've lost, it's too late to get it back. His face crumpled, and for a moment I thought he might actually break down. But he pulled himself together with visible effort. Goodbye, Margaret. Take care of Lily. She's lucky to have you. I know. Richard walked away across the frozen grass, his shoulders bent, his steps slow. I watched him get into his town car and drive away, out of the cemetery, out of our lives for the second and final time. After his car disappeared, I knelt in the grass where he'd been, placing my hand on the cool marble of Rachel's headstone. "I did it, baby girl," I whispered. I took his help and I didn't let him back in. I protected Lily and I protected myself. I kept my boundaries even when it was hard. I think you'd be proud of me." The wind rustled through the bare branches of the young oak tree, and I let myself imagine it was Rachel's approval. My daughter's spirit finally at peace, knowing that her child was safe and her mother was strong. If you've ever had to choose yourself over someone else's redemption, if you've ever had to say no to forgiveness that wasn't earned, drop a comment and let me know. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is hold our boundaries, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Subscribe to Mr. Hawthorne Soul Stories, because what comes next will show you that some victories don't look like reconciliation. They look like peace. 7 months later, my queen's apartment was filled with the beautiful chaos of children's laughter and birthday cake. Lily's 8th birthday party in August 2025 was everything a child's celebration should be. 7 of her friends from school running through rooms that had seen too much sadness and were finally, blessedly, full of joy. Pink frosting smeared on happy faces. Wrapping paper scattered across the floor like confetti. The kind of beautiful mess that only came from a life fully lived. I watched from the kitchen doorway as Lily directed the other children in some elaborate game that seemed to involve princesses and dragons and a lot of dramatic dying. She was completely healthy now, with regular checkups showing no signs of disease. Her hair was thick and shiny, her energy boundless, her future bright and open and full of possibilities. Mrs. Chen appeared at my elbow, carrying a tray of sandwiches cut into triangles. "That child has more energy than should be legal," she said with a smile. Hard to believe where she was 2 years ago. I know. Sometimes I still can't believe it. "You did good, Margaret. Raising her alone, getting her through treatment, keeping your head above water while building your practice. You should be proud." I am. And I was. Proud of the life I'd rebuilt. Proud of the boundaries I'd maintained, even when they were tested. Proud that I'd saved Lily without compromising the woman I'd fought so hard to become. My counseling practice had flourished over the past 7 months since our return from Boston. Word of mouth had brought me new clients, and I'd expanded my practice to include group sessions for caregivers navigating medical crises with children. Helping other grandmothers and aunts and foster parents who'd found themselves raising sick kids on limited budgets and unlimited love. I'd even started supervising younger therapists, teaching them what I'd learned about grief and resilience and the difference between helping people and fixing them. At 69 years old, I was more successful than I'd ever been. More respected in my field. More connected to my community. More certain of my worth. And I'd done it all without Richard. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting a text from one of my clients, and felt my stomach clench when I saw the message from an unknown number. "Happy birthday to Lily. Hope she has a wonderful day. R." I stared at the message for a long moment. Richard had kept his promises over the past 7 months. Stayed away. Maintained his distance. I'd heard through Dr. Chen, who still occasionally sent updates about Lily's case being used to improve protocols, that the Hope Harbor Clinic had expanded. The Rachel Sullivan Memorial Program now served over 50 families, providing not just medical care but counseling support and respite care for grandparents raising grandchildren. Good work. Meaningful work. The kind of legacy that actually mattered. But good behavior didn't entitle him to access. Didn't earn him a place in Lily's life. Didn't change the fundamental truth that some doors, once closed, stayed closed. I hesitated for just a moment. My finger hovering over the delete button. And in that hesitation, I felt something I didn't expect. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. But a tiny, grudging acknowledgement that Richard was trying, in his limited way, to do better. He wasn't pushing. Wasn't showing up uninvited. Wasn't demanding access he hadn't earned. He was staying in his lane, honoring my boundaries, doing good work from a distance. It didn't change anything. But it was something. I deleted the message anyway. Because acknowledging his effort didn't mean I had to respond to it. I'd drawn my lines clearly, and I wasn't going to blur them for the sake of politeness. "Grandma." Lily's voice called from the living room. "Come play musical chairs with us." I set down my phone and joined the chaos. Wrapped my arms around my granddaughter as music filled the apartment and children shrieked with laughter. This was my family now. This child, these friends, the life we'd built together through sheer determination and love that didn't come with conditions. I'd saved Lily without compromising myself. I'd accepted help without accepting the person offering it. I'd learned that gratitude and forgiveness were two entirely separate things. That you could acknowledge someone's contribution without letting them back into your heart. Most importantly, I'd shown Lily through example what it looked like to be a woman who knew her worth. Who set boundaries and kept them. Who survived and thrived on her own terms. That night, after the party was over and the other children had gone home, Lily and I sat together on the couch going through her presents. She was particularly excited about a new book series one of her friends had given her. Something about girls who solved mysteries and saved the day. "Grandma," she said suddenly, looking up from the book, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "At school, some of the other kids have grandpas who come to their concerts and stuff. Do I have a grandpa?" My heart stopped. In all the chaos of treatment and recovery, of protecting her from Richard's potential abandonment, I'd somehow forgotten that eventually Lily would ask this question. That her friends' family trees would make her wonder about the gaps in her own. "You do," I said carefully, my throat tight. "But he lives far away and we don't see him." "Why not?" "It's complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes families are complicated." Lily considered this with the seriousness of someone much older than 8. "Did he do something bad?" I thought about how to answer honestly without burdening her with pain she didn't need to carry. "He wasn't there for your mom when she needed him," I said finally. "And I decided it was better for us to build our own family, just you and me and the people who show up for us every day." "Like Mrs. Chen?" "Exactly like Mrs. Chen. And Mrs. Patterson from Boston, and your teachers, and your friends. Family is the people who are present, not just the people who are related to you." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. "That's okay. I like our family the way it is." "Me too, sweetheart." "Me too." She went back to examining her book, and I sat there feeling the weight of what I'd just done. I'd protected her from Richard. Protected her from the possibility of loving someone who might let her down. Protected her from the kind of disappointment that had shaped Rachel's entire life. But I'd also deprived her of the choice. Made the decision for her about whether her grandfather deserved a chance. Was I right? I honestly didn't know. But I'd made the choice I believed was best, and I'd live with the consequences. Over the next 5 years, life settled into a rhythm that felt like healing. Lily thrived. She became an excellent student, making honor roll consistently and developing a particular passion for science. She joined the school's robotics team and discovered she had a talent for engineering. She made friends easily, played soccer in the fall and softball in spring, and slowly became the kind of confident, happy child that every parent dreams of raising. Her quarterly checkups continued to show no signs of disease. After 2 years, Dr. Chen officially declared her cured. The word felt like a miracle every time I said it. Cured. Not just in remission, but actually cured. My counseling practice continued to grow. I published an article in a professional journal about supporting families through pediatric medical crises. Was invited to speak at conferences. Built a reputation as someone who understood both the clinical and personal sides of grief and resilience. I trained 3 younger therapists who went on to open their own practices. Created a sliding scale program so that families who couldn't afford private therapy could still access care. Built something meaningful and sustainable that would outlast me. At 74, I was healthier and more fulfilled than I'd been at 40. Age had brought clarity instead of decline. purpose instead of stagnation. Richard kept his distance. Every year on Lily's birthday, a text would come from an unknown number. Just a simple message. Happy birthday. Hope she's well. And every year, I deleted it without responding. I heard about him occasionally through the clinic's annual reports that arrived in the mail. The Rachel Sullivan Memorial Program continued to expand, serving hundreds of families now. They'd added programs for mental health support, educational assistance, and even job placement services for parents and caregivers. Good work. Work that mattered. But it didn't change my answer. Then, in May 2030, everything changed. I was at home preparing dinner when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Mrs. Sullivan? This is Patricia Rodriguez from the Sullivan Foundation. Hello, Patricia. Her voice sounded strained, and my stomach tightened with instinct honed from years of nursing. What can I do for you? I'm calling to inform you that Richard Sullivan suffered a massive stroke 3 days ago. He's in intensive care at Mount Sinai Hospital. He's not expected to recover. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank into a kitchen chair, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. I see, I managed. Why are you calling me? Because you're listed in his personal files as next of kin. There's no one else. And because he left explicit instructions that if anything happened to him, you were to be informed immediately. Next of kin. After nearly 14 years of divorce, after all the boundaries and distance and deliberate separation, I was still his next of kin. Does he have a healthcare proxy? Someone making medical decisions? He does. His attorney, David Chen. But Mr. Sullivan's living will is very clear. No extraordinary measures. He's on comfort care only. Patricia's voice softened. Mrs. Sullivan, the doctors say it's a matter of days, maybe hours. I thought you should know. Thank you for calling. There's one more thing. Mr. Sullivan has been asking for you. He's not fully conscious, but when he has lucid moments, he asks if you've been notified. I know your history is complicated, and I'm not asking you to come. I'm just telling you what he's asking for. I'll think about it, I said, knowing even as I spoke that I'd already made my decision. That evening, after Lily was in bed, I sat in my living room staring at the wall, trying to understand what I was feeling. Not grief, exactly. Richard and I had been over for so long that his dying didn't feel like losing something I still had. But there was something else. A complicated mix of closure and unfinished business. The strange weight of being the only person in the world who'd loved him before he became the person he ended up being. The next day, I called Mrs. Patterson, the grandmother from Boston who'd become a lasting friend. Asked if she could stay with Lily for a few hours. Where are you going? Lily asked as I put on my coat. To visit someone who's very sick. I'll be home for dinner. The ICU at Mount Sinai was quiet, the particular hush that came from machines doing the work that bodies could no longer do. A nurse directed me to Richard's room, her face sympathetic in a way that told me she knew this was the end. Richard lay in the hospital bed looking smaller than I remembered. The machines keeping him alive beeped and hissed softly. His silver hair was thin now, almost gone. His face, once so sharp and commanding, had gone soft with illness and age. He looked like what he was. A 72-year-old man dying alone. I pulled a chair beside his bed and sat down. I didn't take his hand. Didn't speak immediately. Just sat there watching the rise and fall of his chest, mechanical and assisted. After a few minutes, his eyes fluttered open. Unfocused at first, then sharpening slightly when they found my face. Margaret, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I'm here. Lily? She's fine. Healthy. Happy. Brilliant, actually. She wants to be a doctor. His lips twitched in something that might have been a smile. Like Rachel. No, I said firmly. Like herself. She's her own person, Richard. Not a replacement or a do-over. Just Lily. He closed his eyes, and I thought he might have slipped away. But then he spoke again. Thank you. For coming. Didn't think you would. I almost didn't. Made a mess of everything, he said, each word an effort. Everything that mattered. Yes, you did. Clinic. Keep going. I'll make sure of it. The work there is too important to stop. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen unconscious. Then, so softly I almost missed it. Sorry. So sorry. I know. And I did. I knew he was sorry. Knew he'd spent the last decade trying, in his limited way, to atone for failures that couldn't be undone. Knew he'd died alone because he'd chosen work over love so many times that eventually love stopped offering itself. But knowing he was sorry didn't change anything. Didn't make me forgive him. Didn't make the ending different. Richard died 2 days later, on a Tuesday morning while I was making Lily breakfast. Patricia called to tell me, her voice gentle with the news I'd been expecting. The funeral was small. Mostly colleagues and board members from his company. A few representatives from the clinic. I attended, sitting in the back row with my arms crossed, there to bear witness but not to grieve. When it was over, Patricia handed me an envelope. He wrote this 6 months ago. Asked me to give it to you after he was gone. I took it but didn't open it until I was home, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of tea I wasn't drinking. The letter was short. Written in Richard's distinctive handwriting, shaky now with age or illness. Margaret. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I won't waste your time asking for forgiveness I don't deserve. I just wanted you to know a few things. First, the clinic is fully endowed. It will continue operating long after both of us are gone. The Rachel Sullivan Memorial Program is my real legacy, the only thing I built that actually matters. I hope it helps families the way it helped Lily. Second, Lily's trust is secure. She'll have choices. Education, opportunities, freedom to become whoever she wants to be. That's not me trying to buy my way into her life. It's me making sure she doesn't have to struggle the way you did. Third, and most important, you were right about everything. Every accusation, every harsh truth, every boundary you set. You were right, and I was wrong. I spent 31 years of our marriage choosing the wrong things, and I've spent the last 14 years living with those choices. I died alone because I chose to be alone. That's on me, not you. Thank you for keeping your word about the cemetery visit. Thank you for letting me say goodbye to Rachel. Thank you for protecting Lily from me when I didn't deserve access to her. You built a beautiful life without me. That's exactly as it should be. Goodbye, Margaret. Richard. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where I kept important documents. Not to treasure it. Not to forgive him. But to remember. Some endings don't include reconciliation. Some apologies come too late. Some people die with their regrets intact because that's what they've earned. Richard Sullivan saved my granddaughter's life. That mattered. That was worth acknowledging. But it didn't change the fact that he'd failed as a father and a husband in every way that counted. It didn't make our ending different. It didn't mean he'd earned his way back into our lives. A week later, I sat Lily down in our living room. She was 13 now, on the edge of adolescence, old enough to understand complicated truths. Lily, I need to tell you something. Your grandfather died last week. She looked at me with those green eyes so much like Rachel's. The grandfather I never met? Yes. His name was Richard Sullivan. He was married to me for 31 years, and he was your mother's father. Why didn't I know him? I took a deep breath. Because he wasn't good at being a father to your mom. He chose his work over his family, and it hurt your mother very much. When you got sick, he funded the clinic that saved your life. That was a good thing. But I decided that saving your life didn't mean he'd earned the right to be part of it. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Was that the right choice? I don't know, sweetheart. I made the choice I thought was best. I protected you from someone who might have let you down. But I also kept you from knowing him, and maybe that wasn't fair to you. Did he want to know me? I think he did. But I said no. Lily nodded slowly, processing. Did he leave me anything? A trust fund for your education. You'll get access when you're 25. It's a lot of money, Lily. Enough that you'll have choices I never had. That was nice of him. It was. He did some good things. The clinic he built helps a lot of families. But good actions don't erase bad history. I understand. And she did. I could see it in her face. My granddaughter, brilliant and mature beyond her years, understanding that people were complicated. That you could acknowledge someone's contribution without forgiving their failures. Do you wish you'd known him? I asked. Lily thought about it seriously. Maybe. But I'm okay with how things are. I had you, and you were enough. I pulled her close, tears pricking my eyes. You were always enough too, sweetheart. Always. 2 years later, in June 2032, I attended Lily's 8th grade graduation. She was 15 now, tall and confident, about to start high school with plans to focus on science and engineering. She'd been accepted into a prestigious STEM program at a magnet school. She'd done it on her own merit, through her own hard work, without needing Richard's name or money to open doors. She gave a speech as class valedictorian, talking about resilience and second chances and the importance of helping others. She mentioned her illness briefly, matter-of-factly, as the thing that had taught her to value every day and never take health for granted. She didn't mention Richard. Didn't talk about the clinic or the grandfather she'd never met. As far as Lily knew, her survival was a combination of good medicine, good luck, and her grandmother's determination. And maybe that was the truth. Maybe everything else was just background noise. After the ceremony, as we walked to the car, Lily slipped her hand into mine. Grandma, I've been thinking about what I want to do when I grow up. Tell me. I want to be a doctor. But not the kind who works in hospitals. I want to work in free clinics like the one that helped me. Places where kids can get care even if their families don't have money. My throat tightened. That's a beautiful goal, sweetheart. You taught me that. You taught me that we should help people. That we should use whatever we have, even if it's not much, to make things better. I stopped walking and turned to face her. You're going to do amazing things, Lily. I'm so proud of you. She hugged me tight. I'm proud of you too, Grandma. You saved my life. We saved each other, I said. And it was true. Lily had given me a reason to keep living when Rachel died. Had taught me that I was stronger than I knew. Had shown me that love didn't require perfection, just presence. Everything Richard's money had bought couldn't compare to what Lily and I had built together. This relationship. This trust. This love that came without conditions or expectations or demands for redemption. This was my happy ending. Not reconciliation with the man who'd failed me. Not forgiveness that wasn't earned. But this. A granddaughter who was alive and thriving. A life I'd built on my own terms. Peace that came from holding my boundaries and refusing to compromise the woman I'd fought to become. Richard Sullivan had saved Lily's life with his clinic. But I'd given her something more valuable. A model of strength. An example of resilience. Proof that women could survive and thrive without the men who'd hurt them. That was the legacy that mattered. That was the story worth telling. Some happy endings didn't include forgiveness. Some victories were won by standing firm and refusing to compromise. Some doors, once closed, stayed closed. And that was exactly how it should be. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself over someone else's redemption, please share it with a woman who needs to hear it. Like this video if you believe that boundaries are an act of love, not cruelty. And subscribe to Mr. Hawthorne's Soul Stories for more narratives that honor real strength, The kind that comes from knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. Because Margaret's story isn't just about surviving a medical crisis. It's about understanding that gratitude doesn't obligate reconciliation. That accepting help doesn't mean accepting the person. That some mistakes are permanent, and that's okay. That women can be strong and soft, grateful and firm, loving and boundaried all at once. Margaret chose herself and Lily. She accepted Richard's resources while rejecting Richard himself. She saved her granddaughter without compromising her hard-won independence. And in doing so, she showed all of us that the strongest thing a woman can do is know her worth and protect it. That's the real happy ending. Not the fairy tale reconciliation. But the peace that comes from building a life so full and meaningful that you don't need the people who failed you to make it complete. Margaret's life was complete. Lily was healthy and thriving, planning a future built on her own merit. And the doors Richard had closed through his neglect stayed closed through Margaret's choice. Some endings are perfect precisely because they don't include forgiveness. Some victories taste sweetest because they were won on your terms, not someone else's. This was Margaret's victory. And it was enough. Margaret's story teaches us that strength isn't always about forgiveness. Sometimes it's about knowing when to hold your boundaries. About understanding that gratitude and reconciliation are two different things. About protecting yourself and the people you love from those who've proven they can't be trusted, even when they're trying to change. Richard saved Lily's life. That mattered. That was good work that helped real families. But it didn't erase the years he'd failed Rachel. Didn't guarantee he wouldn't fail Lily the same way. Margaret saw that truth clearly and acted on it, even when it was hard. Even when Richard was dying and asking for her. She showed us that women in their late 60s and beyond aren't past their prime. They're in it. Building careers, raising children, making impossible choices, and thriving on their own terms. Age didn't make Margaret weak. It made her wise enough to know her worth and brave enough to protect it. Some doors stay closed. And sometimes that's the happiest ending of all.